Hey, thank you so much for listening, watching today. I'm really excited that you're here and I get to hang out with you, get a little time together. Of course, I want you to subscribe because we have really, really great content. And at the minimum, you need some laughter, kind of, that we do with our little fun jokes at the end. So thank you for considering that. Also, we're starting a series, and I think this is a really important and very helpful series. It is called Psalms, like in the Bible, Psalms for Soothing Stress. Did you like all that? I think they call it alliteration. It's one of those like English terms. But Psalms for Soothing Stress. And I think it's very appropriate because I think from time to time we go through seasons in our life that have lots and lots of stress. So you might be watching, listening, and you think, well, you know, I'm having difficulties with my finances. I'm having struggles with some decisions I've got to make. You know, I'm kind of struggling on some of the pressure and the intensity from political stuff, from COVID things, from maybe some relationships, family issues, decisions you have to make. I think we all have varying levels of stress. And I love the Psalms because in many respects, they're extremely helpful, particularly when we feel stressed. And stress, you know, it can come in all shapes, sizes, forms, and it's part of what it means to be human from time to time. So I want us to consider, as we look at these Psalms, what I did was I partnered up the Psalms that go with the events in David's life. So David wrote lots of the Psalms, like over 70 of them. And when he wrote them from time to time around something he was going through, and usually something stressful. So I figured it was appropriate because if David went through stress, we go through stress, then what are some Psalms that could soothe, because they soothed David. You read them and they're very, very helpful. What are some appropriate Psalms that can help us at various seasons and experiences of stress? So today I want to talk briefly about David's experience of running away from Saul. I want to frame that for you because I think if you can appreciate the stress and pressure that David was under, it will help you, and particularly when we hit a couple of the verses from the Psalms David wrote during that season. So you think about David running away from Saul, let's remember that David was anointed to be king by Samuel. And even that anointing experience was kind of like a backdoor one because his dad, David's dad, brought in all of his other brothers and then kind of like left him out with the sheep, the youngest one, and kind of like as an afterthought. Oh yeah, that shepherd kid, he's also here. So Samuel anoints David, and even when he's an afterthought with his dad, but he anoints him to be king. And then shortly after that, you see this. So that's got to be a really profound experience. Anointed to be king by Samuel. I mean, that's a big deal. And out of that's kind of random. How does that happen? And he's probably in his teens at that time. And then shortly after that, he kills Goliath. Well, that's a big deal. No pun intended. That's massive because all of the army of Israel is too afraid. Saul is too afraid to confront Goliath. David, the little shepherd boy with a slingshot, right? He hits Goliath in the head, falls down, chops his head off, and gets a huge victory for Israel. You know, David suddenly becomes this no-name little shepherd dude out in the wilderness hanging out with sheep. Now he's this triumphant victor, you know, military phenomenon. And so he goes from all this really amazing stuff that happens, and it's really, I would say, kind of a very much of a peak experience. It's super exciting. And then over the course of time, not very long, his star begins to wane because Saul starts to get jealous of David. Everybody likes David. Saul's son Jonathan is like his best friend. And everybody wants to be around David. David is a great military leader. He becomes a leader. And Saul becomes threatened and jealous by David. And even David trying to soothe Saul, he would play his harp and soothe Saul when Saul was anxious and was tormented by an evil spirit. David came to play psalms for him. And even in that, Saul was furious, outraged, and tried to pin David against the wall with a spear more than once. So David has to run. He runs away for his life. And it's not just like, you know, gotta hop on a plane and pop over to some random country for a week and then I can come back. David is running for his life literally more than 10 years. And it is a massively stressful time. There are some, you read about this in 1 Samuel, you'll read that there's one season, one time where David is on one side of the mountain, Saul is on the other side, and Saul's about ready to close in and come and capture and kill David. And Saul gets called off because of a Philistine attack over in Israel. And David is saved because of God's rescuing intervention, really. And David is living on a prayer and a hanging by a thread. I mean, he is from day to day. And it's awful. He's living in the Judean wilderness, which is desolate beyond desolate. There's virtually nothing alive there. It's dry. It's empty. It's a complete void. It is. You don't want to go there. I mean, it's. Ugh. I mean, just all kinds of dirt and erosion. And that's it. You don't see plants, nothing green. It is desolate. And David is there, living in the Judean wilderness, trying to keep alive and run away, save his life from Saul, who wants to kill him. And Saul's pursuit is irrational. It makes zero sense. And I think David at this point, he's like, I don't understand, God. I don't understand. You anointed me to be the king. I had this great, military victory over Goliath. I was super popular, and I go from the peak to the pit. I plummet. I'm like now trying to run for my life. And I think sometimes we go through seasons in our life that are extremely stressful, where we're like, I'm swamped, and every which way I look is hardship and struggle and pressure. And I'm just stressed out. Stress from my family, stress from my job, stress from my health, stress from traffic, and little things that normally would just kind of roll off, they're just magnified. They're huge. They're monstrosities. And that stress stuff, it gets inside of us. And how do we navigate? How do we deal with that? And again, if this is also a long experience for you, sometimes you go through a long season of stress where it's like, I just can't get any relief. I can't get any kind of exhale, some kind of breathing room. And I think David and the Psalms that he wrote could be very, very helpful. In fact, let's look at a couple Psalms that David wrote during this season of tremendous stress, pressure, when he's running away from Saul, and it's lasting more than 10 years. One of the Psalms he wrote is in Psalms 59. The whole chapter is about his escape, trying to flee from Saul. And verse 1, David says this, "Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Set me securely on high, away from those who rise up against me." And then in verse 10 it says, "For God in his loving kindness will meet me. God will let me look triumphantly upon my foes." In verse 9 it says, "Because of his strength I will watch for you. God is my stronghold." And I think when we're in stressful times, when we have difficulties, hardships, and we feel pressed on every side, we have to keep God as our central focus. Because I think what I find in my own experience is when I have stress, really tremendous times of stress, it's very easy to focus and get concentrating on the stress. And when I do that, it tends to amplify and make the stress get bigger. But I would invite you to recalibrate your focus and keep it centered on God. That's what David does, and that's what he models here in chapter 59. And also Psalm 63, verse 1. Another psalm that David wrote. If you want to read psalms that are going to soothe your stress, you're in a difficult time, you feel like you're struggling to endure, Psalm 59, Psalm 63. "O God," this is verse 1, "you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water." Verse 3, "Because your loving kindness is better than life, my lips will praise you." And I just encourage you in this time, in this season, that you really press into God and maybe even consider reading each of these Psalms, Psalm 59, Psalm 63, or just one of them. If you pick one, pick 63. Read this every day. Maybe you want to try it morning, noon, evening, bedtime, just to kind of help some recalibrating, some refocus, and to set your hope and assurance that God is bringing you through, helping you. He's your rescue. He's your fortress. He's your safe place, no matter what the stress is going on around you. So I want to encourage you, thank you for subscribing. Of course, hit the notification bell so you get updates when we post new content. You want to pass this on to some friends as well, because I believe we all have people in our lives, relatives that have stress, going through stress, and I think this would be very, very encouraging to them. Also, I want you to consider this question. What do you use as a stress relief? What's your most common go-to stress relief? Now, for some of us, that might be some shady things. So maybe you just want to say something like, well, food, or, maybe exercise, or, maybe you kind of take some breathing exercises, maybe you write a little bit, I don't know, but we all have little common stress relievers. So what is your common stress reliever? And after you answer that, here is your fantastic joke for today. Wait for it. I know it's almost, you're going to hear yourself groan here in just a few seconds. What kind of prize do you give someone who hasn't moved a muscle in over a year? Like they haven't moved a muscle in over a year. You give them a trophy. Atrophy. Get it? I know. Even the camera operators are like, oh. All right, but next week, is going to be so much better. Thanks again.